the stories we inherit.
Every summer, our family returned to southern New England, our ancestral home. At its heart was Broadview Farm, set between the village of Avondale on the Pawcatuck River and Watch Hill, the storied resort town on Rhode Island's coast. It was a stately colonial-era home with Victorian trimmings and a commanding view of the grounds. Our grandparents, Harold and Mildred Lanphier, lived there in the modest wing of the old farmhouse. The main house was rented out to young families, saving, struggling, starting over. First there were the Bennetts, then the Buleys, the Bostroms, and finally the Chaponis. Much of its history seemed lost over time. Who built the farmhouse? When did it become part of our family? And how did Henry Clinton Lanphier, our great-great-grandfather, a stableman and farmer, manage to buy it? A few years back, we found a clue tucked among some of Henry's papers, a deed to Broadview Farm, dated 1877. Henry was 37 years old when he bought the 200-acre farm for $10,500 from William Chapman, who was too old to work the land. To pay for it, Henry sold property he inherited from his father, Captain Clark Lanphier. It was prime land near the booming granite quarries. Westerly's granite industry, known for its fine-grained stone used in monuments and buildings across the country, shaped Westerly's economy and landscape. That boom helped build Broadview Farm. The deed relied on landmarks and neighbors' names, not exactly GPS coordinates, to delineate the property. It described a certain lot or parcel of land lying and being in said Westerly with 2 dwelling houses and other improvements thereon. Bounded by the Pawcatuck River, the lands of George Card, Halsey Burdick, Benjamin Bentley, Cortlandt Chapman, and extending to the Atlantic Ocean. Then southerly by the Atlantic Ocean and westerly by the land of John Browning. It included a harbor known as Colonel's Cove and came with seaweed privileges, the right to rake and cart off seaweed from the shore. To recreate the boundary, we turned to an 1895 map into the stone walls that still line the fields. Those walls told stories, hand-laid, now covered in lichen and weathered by time with the fingerprint of generations past. Each stone pulled from the soil and set into place by hands that knew both hardship and pride. The Pawcatuck River, winding through southern Rhode Island, shaped our lives for over 300 years. It provided us fish. It ferried our boats and steamers. It powered mills and defined boundaries. It was our livelihood and our playground. Avondale, the small community once known as Lottery Village, began with a tragedy. Captain Joseph Pendleton's ship, filled with rum and molasses and captained by his son, vanished on its return from the West Indies. Ship, cargo, and son gone. The loss was uninsured. To recoup it, Captain Pendleton convinced the General Assembly to approve a lottery to sell parcels of his farm. 26,000 tickets were sold for 124 house lots and cash prizes. Later, when the post office arrived, someone decided that Lotteryville lacked a certain respectability. They renamed it Avondale. In those days, most people in Avondale married someone who lived within 5 miles. It was a village of tight bonds and tangled roots. Over the generations, the Lanphiers wove their lives with other prominent families, the Burdicks, Clarks, Edwards, and Perrys, from nearby Westerly, Hopkinton, Ashaway, and Stonington. The Lanphiers had lived in this region since the 1660s, first as farmers, then fishermen and sea captains, tradesmen and businessmen, always adapting to the tides of fortune. In 1883, Henry sold part of Broadview Farm to Charles Chapman. The land would later become the Misquamicut Golf Course. In 1887, Henry bought the Watch Hill livery stable from a group of Cincinnati investors. It became the Lanphier Livery. Around that time, Cincinnati was booming on pork and soap. Wealthy families, including the founders of Procter & Gamble, began fleeing the city's summer heat and epidemics, buying up land in Watch Hill and building cottages by the sea. Watch Hill became Newport's more modest cousin, just as charming but quieter. Today, Taylor Swift owns the old Harkness house, which tells you something about the neighborhood. When our father was a boy, he had friends from those wealthy families, but there was always an undercurrent, what John Casey and Spartina called class rage. Eventually, Broadview Farm was swept up in that tide. More parcels were sold off in the following decades, but the farmhouse remained in the family for over a century. Henry passed it to his son Frederick, who handed it down to his son Harold. The house was sold in 1995, though a few parcels along Watch Hill Road are still owned by our cousins. Broadview Farm was no longer a working farm, but an exclusive golf course. Losing the farm felt like a quiet kind of ancestral grief, but memory has a longer reach than ownership. Before the Lanfears or the Chapmans or the Pendletons, the land belonged to the Niantic and Narragansett. The Misquamicut Purchase of 1660, a 20 by 10 mile acquisition, encompassed today's Westerly, Charlestown, Richmond, and Hopkinton. Over time, that land was absorbed, parcel by parcel, deed by deed, without ever really acknowledging what was taken. Even the name Misquamicut, meaning place of red fish, is a faint echo of the people who came before us. That too is part of the inheritance. What we inherit isn't just land or wealth, it's the stories that shape us, giving us belonging, continuity, and purpose. Broadview Farm holds the layered histories of the Niantic and Narragansett, the Pendletons and Chapmans, and eventually ours. We never truly owned the land. At best, we're stewards, entrusted to live on it, shape it, and pass it on. Across generations, our ancestors adapted to each changing tide as farmers, fishermen, millers, homemakers, liverymen, businessmen, greenskeepers, boat builders, carpenters, and chauffeurs. We built stone walls, launched boats, turned soil, and measured fields. And sometimes, when you trace those old boundaries on a map, you find your way back home.